We're starting soon. So,
sur l'invité.
Ouais.
T'en penses quoi? Je suis bien là?
Je vais essayer. Hein.
Mazin, can you hear us?
yes, I can hear you.
Okay, we're almost ready.
Starting. You admit the people on YouTube? Please open YouTube channel if you have not already.
Yes, we're working on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
Lorenzo, the link is open now for YouTube?
Bonsoir. Quoi? On peut y aller. C'est bon. Ok. Bon, eh ben on va commencer. Hein. Je laisse tout le monde s'installer. C'est bon, on peut commencer? Très bien. C'est parti, on commence. Alors, je m'excuse, je vais faire l'introduction en anglais pour aujourd'hui. Mais vous aurez une traduction instantanée grâce à nos services de sous-titrage. Alors, ça va si vous m'entendez bien, il n'y a pas d'écho, c'est bon. Je commence. Je m'excuse pour l'anglais. Good evening and welcome to the 24th talk in our Palestine seminar at the École Normale Supérieure. We are very grateful to our main speaker, Mazin Qumsiyeh, and our moderator, Marc Fleurbaey, for being here today with us. The goal of the seminar is twofold. We strive to think with Palestine about its history and current situation, while also recognizing that Palestine functions as a catalyst to think across disciplines, whether it's international law, geopolitics, economics, sociology, or artistic fields. This interdisciplinary seminar is supported by several departments at the École Normale Supérieure: the history, philosophy, cognitive studies, and geography departments. The departments of languages ECLA, thanks to Professor Dufour for being here today with us, and the Center of Environmental Studies. Here are a few rules to ensure that this talk goes well. We will not tolerate any racist, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, sexist, homophobic, or transphobic comments, or any minimization of war crimes and crimes against humanity, or any comment aiming to dehumanize a people, an ethnic group, or a religious community. Please don't record the speakers, the organizers, or the audience without their consent, and don't shout or interrupt them as they are speaking. Please ask real questions and refrain from long comments or provocations. A few words about the situation in Gaza now. Israeli forces continued their daily strikes on Palestinians since the end of the ceasefire on March 18th. Terrestrial forces have extended their control to 50% of Gaza in order to create a buffer zone. Israel has also stopped all imports in Gaza, including food and medicine, since March 2. The death toll of journalists, among which Fatima Hassouma, 25 years old, murdered on the 16th of April along with 10 members of her family, has reached more than 200. Fatima was the protagonist of a documentary by Iranian filmmaker Sepideh Farsi entitled "Put Your Soul on Your Hand and Walk," which is set to be presented at the Cannes Festival next May. On the 25th of April, the UN World Food Programme announced that its food stocks in Gaza have run out under Israel's blockade. NGOs have repeatedly denounced the weaponization of famine by Israel. On the 28th of April, today, the hearings about Israel's obligations to facilitate aid deliveries have started at the International Court of Justice. UN and Palestinian representatives have accused Israel of breaking international law by refusing to let aid into Gaza. According to the Health Ministry of Gaza, the death toll of injuries since March 18th, when Israel broke the ceasefire, has reached 2,222 killed and 5,751 injured. The total death toll is of 52,314 deaths. Today's talk will be on the following topic: ecocide versus sustainability of human and natural communities, Palestine and beyond. This conference will be followed on the 12th of May by another one on the same topic, on a similar topic, l'agriculture palestinienne en contexte colonial. The concept of ecocide has become more and more important in public debate during the past years and as a conceptual instrument to understand what is happening in Palestine. For those who would like to know more about the ecocide in Palestine, a major contribution was given by Forensic Architecture on the 29th of March 2024, entitled "No Traces of Life, Israel's Ecocide in Gaza in 2023-2024. In this study, we learned that prior to 2023, Gaza contained 170 square kilometers of agricultural land, accounting for about 47% of its total area. Israel's ground invasion has advanced over nearly 50% of Gazan farm and orchards. As of March 2024, so last year, approximately 40% of the land in Gaza previously used for food production has been destroyed. According to Lucia Rebolino and Samaneh Mohafi, who conducted this inquiry, the destruction of agricultural land and infrastructure in Gaza is a deliberate act of ecocide and a critical dimension of Israel's genocidal campaign. The targeted farms and greenhouses are fundamental to local food production for a population already under a decades-long siege. The effects of this systematic agricultural destruction are exacerbated by other deliberate acts of deprivation of critical resources for Palestinian survival in Gaza. These acts include the well-reported catastrophic and Israeli-made famine ongoing in Gaza, continued obstruction of humanitarian aid destined for Gaza, the destruction of medical infrastructure, the destruction beyond repair of other areas of civilian infrastructure, including bakeries, schools, mosques, churches, and cultural heritage sites. To speak about this issue today, I will now introduce our speakers. Mazin Qumsiyeh, which was with us already last year, and we're pleased to meet again, teaches and researches at Bethlehem University, and he's the head of the BU's Cytogenetics Laboratory, as well as the Palestine Museum of Natural History and the Institute of Biodiversity and Sustainability in Occupied Palestine. He has also taught at Birzeit and Al-Quds universities. He is the author of Sharing the Land of Canaan, Human Rights and the Israeli-Palestinian Struggle, Popular Resistance in Palestine, A History of Hope and Empowerment, Mammals of the Holy Land, and the Bats of Egypt. He has served on the boards of the Palestinian Center for Rapprochement, between people in Beit Sahur and the Al-Rawad Cultural and Theatrical Society in Aida refugee camp. Marc Fleurbaey is Director of Research at the CNRS, Professor at the Paris School of Economics, and Adjunct Professor at ENS-PSL. He is the author of Beyond GDP with Didier Blanchet, A Theory of Fairness and Social Welfare with François Maniquet, and Fairness, Responsibility and Welfare. He is a former editor of Social Choice and Welfare in Economics and Philosophy, and he is currently Associate Editor of Philosophy and Public Affairs, as well as Politics, Philosophy and Economics. He is one of the initiators of the International Panel on Social Progress and lead author of its Manifesto for Social Progress in 2018. He was coordinating author for the 5th IPCC report, a member of the UN Committee for Development Policy from 2016 to 2021, and has chaired the T20 working groups in recent years. Thank you again for being here. The floor is yours.
Hello everyone, and hello Mazin. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you with us tonight. So we will first listen to your talk. I understand you have some slides to share.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. Hope you can see my screen. So I will try to be brief to leave good time for questions. I'm actually speaking to you from Beirut, Lebanon, where I'm here on a mission of learning about the environment and the protection of the environment here with some colleagues, and to develop regional cooperation on environmental issues. I was before that in Jordan and in Cyprus, and this year I will go also to South America to do some further collaboration on these issues. Very briefly, I mean, Palestine is an important part of the world because it's where humans migrated out of Africa to the rest of the world over 150,000 years ago, actually, the new number. And that's Homo sapiens out of Africa. Homo erectus, of course, existed older in Europe and in other parts of Asia. But it's even today, birds migrate through Palestine on annual migration between Eurasia and Africa. Annually, we have 500 million birds that migrate. The geography and the topography and the geologic history of this part of the world, what some people call Near East, some people call Middle East, Eastern Mediterranean, whatever. This part of the world is part of the Fertile Crescent, where humans first developed agriculture, where we first domesticated plants and animals. And the people who lived here since the time of migration out of Africa lived in relative harmony with nature and developed, of course, distinct cultures and language and customs, but also Palestine was a crossroad of culture and history, not just Palestine, of course, Lebanon and other parts of Western Fertile Crescent. So if you look at this picture, for example, you will see Palestinians of various backgrounds meeting together in 1932 to object to the Balfour Declaration. Now, why did they object to the Balfour Declaration? By the way, there was a French declaration at the same time almost called Jules Cambon Declaration, which also promised to make a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Both the Balfour and the Cambon declarations, 1917, said basically we want to create a Jewish homeland. The problem is, of course, the local people, which you see here, were of diverse religions and cultures and background, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, and so obviously they objected to reducing this diversity to have a Jewish state in Palestine. Because they knew what it would mean. It would mean basically ethnic cleansing and removal of the local people, and that's indeed what happened. And you can read books like Ilan Pape's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, Israeli historian, many other Israeli and other historians wrote about this. It's available, by the way, in French if you want to look it up. 500 plus Palestinian villages and towns were depopulated. You can see those on the map on the right. And the colonization, of course, affected everything and has many symptoms. The purpose of this talk is not talk about the human effect on genocide and so forth. I want to talk about one of the symptoms, which is ecocide. Colonialism, of course, is an ecocide by its nature. Think of the colonization of the Europeans in other countries. For example, the British in North America and the US, how much landscape destruction they caused, how many invasive species they brought, etc. Think of the Aborigine in Australia and what the impact on the landscape of Australia and the local fauna and flora of Australia, that the Europeans brought so many invasive species, whether it's for their fox hunts or whether to make the landscape look European and so on. This is natural for colonization to do. This is what, even without direct conflict or war, as we would call it, happening. There is erasing landscapes, walls, military camps, etc. When Israel was created, for example, they destroyed tens of millions of local trees, and they planted only one kind of tree, which is Pinus salipensis, the European pine tree. The European pine tree, I have nothing against it, but if you have a monoculture of it in a dry climate, it's susceptible to fire. It's also biodiversity impact is very severe because pine trees don't allow many other trees to grow underneath them, and so on. And you can see here in West Jerusalem, there's now actually fires in West Jerusalem, between Jerusalem and Jaffa, that are consuming a large number of these pine trees that were planted by the colonizers. So it's devastating for our environment. Another aspect of ecocide in our case, and this happened also in other colonization, is divergence of water and destruction of water resources. That happened in the Americas, for example, or in other countries that were colonized. In our case, the diversion of the water of the Jordan River Basin from Lake Tiberias to the west resulted in desertification of the area. In this Jordan River, you can see dropped down from 1,350 million cubic meters per year to only 20 million cubic meters per year. That's barely a stream. You can walk across it, 1.2 meter wide only near the Dead Sea. There was a drainage of the wetlands in the Hula area. The picture on the right is of Palestinian woman before 1948 harvesting the reeds from these wetlands. Drying of these wetlands resulted in the loss of over 219 species. I'll skip some slides because of time, but the idea of Zionism is more than just simply issue of Palestine. It's wider interest than that. The Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, clearly articulated this in both Israeli TV to the Israeli public and also at the United Nations. He said, we're building an empire. It will be connecting Asia to Europe through Israel, and he doesn't recognize there's anything called Palestine or Palestinians. And this will be an alternative to the Road and Belt initiative of China, New Silk Road, if you want, which is between China to Europe via countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq. Of course, conflict itself is devastating. In this particular conflict, so far, over 100,000 tons have been dropped on Gaza. 100,000 tons have been dropped. In fact, most of them were in the first 51 days, 52,000 tons dropped in the first 51 days, which is more than the 2014 conflict, much more than what's in the 2014 conflict. Now, actually, the number is 85% of residential buildings are destroyed or severely damaged, and the other 15% remaining have partial damage. This is what's happening in Gaza, of course, as we speak. Bombing, I mean, just the last 24 hours, over 200 bombings in Gaza that resulted in the killing of over 67 people, some under the rubble, we don't know how many, just in the past 24 hours. And that includes one half of them are children, 70% of them are children and women. And of course, there's the ethnic cleansing and the removal of people from one place to another. In terms of the Ecocide, to go back to the Ecocide aspect, we did some studies using remote sensing. And you can see on the map on the right, the remote sensing image, month by month, destruction of tree cover in Gaza. And you can see most of the beginning was in North Gaza and then went to South Gaza, methodically in the first 12 months. And the graph on the lower right shows the cumulative tree damage in Gaza. In some places now it's 95%. Of course, the bombing is one thing, but even the military activities themselves are devastating environmentally. For example, Israel produced in greenhouse gases just from flying the jets that are in Gaza, just from jet fuel, produced more greenhouse gases in the first 60 days of conflict, in the first 2 months of conflict, than the Central African Republic produced from all its sources of greenhouse gas emissions. That includes, kitchens and automobiles and industries and everything else. And of course, that's the first 2 months. Now we are in month 16 or 17, I believe, so you have to multiply that by 8 times. There is post-conflict damage that includes unexploded munitions, destruction to be repaired, millions of tons of debris that have to be removed. There is the depleted uranium and heavy metals and others that come from the white phosphorus, for example, white phosphorus, chemicals that remain both in natural areas and urban areas. Now, the title that was read says that I want to talk to you, not to depress you about the problems and the challenges, but to tell you a little bit of the solutions and the issues of sustainability. And I'm going to take an example for just a few minutes from our Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. Now, why biodiversity and sustainability? Because we have a mission to sustain human and natural communities. Sustain human and natural communities. And you cannot sustain humans if nature is damaged, destroyed. So to do that, we have started this institute. We have a Museum of Natural History, a botanic and eco garden, a biodiversity center, an environmental impact assessment center, an animal rehabilitation unit, and all these other units you see on this slide. It's to serve the people. So, for example, our community garden is for food sovereignty, so that we can establish, we can allow refugees even from the refugee camps that are near us in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is the birthplace of Jesus, by the way, and it has 3 refugee camps. They come and grow their own vegetables, their own fish, even in aquaponic systems. This is the garden we have. We have a Museum of Natural History. We do activities for young children. And I say children of all ages, from 4 or 5 years old to 90 years old. So we educate them by creating an environment for learning. And that's how they learn. They learn by doing, as you see here, by touching and feeling and experiencing and playing. We work with women to enhance their capabilities and self-employment and produce economic independence, basically, to grow their own products and develop them and so forth. We welcome volunteers, of course. If any of you want to volunteer with us, you can email us at info@palestinenetwork.org. Room and board, meaning we take care of you, feed good food and a good place to stay. If you volunteer from abroad, we can help you, for example, do various things. Some of you may be interested in research, and you can publish with us on various areas and so on. Our website, if you want to know more, is palestinenetwork.org. And this is just one of the many institutions in Palestine that is concerned with sustainability, food sovereignty, with nature, with biodiversity and environment. And we hope that you will come visit us. We're building a new building, by the way. I don't have pictures of it, but we would love for you to come and see us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mazin, for this talk, and which brought a lot of information to us. I think I was asked to start the conversation with you by a few questions before opening the floor to the room. So maybe what I can do, if you agree, Mazin, is to ask you a few questions, and then you can select which ones you want to answer, or you want to. So some of them are just to encourage you to say a bit more about certain issues. And so you just finished by words of hope about initiatives like the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability that you founded. I would like to ask you about the mix of activities that it has, because it has educational activities, but also practical things, as you described, and also research activities. How do you see the future of the Institute? How do you see its development and the link with other similar institutions in the area? What kind of support would you like to have? Yeah, maybe it's better if you just give an answer now, and then I will see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Indeed, we are just at the beginning of this journey. We started this institute about 10 years ago, and we opened it to the public in 2017. So we're relatively new, but we were able to accomplish a lot. For example, over 160 research publications. We have a herbarium, we have collections, we have a museum, we have botanic garden, a community garden, all these things. Now, what's all these things for? It's not just to have them. It is to achieve a result. What's this result? What are we after, if you want? When I mention sustainability of human and natural communities, this is a long-term vision, of course. Our mission includes these things like research, education, etc., leading to what? Leading to this sustainability. So how do we envision ourselves, let's say, in 5 years or 10 years? Very briefly, I think we are humans, not just us Palestinians, are in a very precarious, difficult position. As you know, climate change, for example, the risk of nuclear war, which always starts with regional wars, and we already started the regional war here in our region, as you know, with Israel and the US and England and France and other countries bombing us here, and some countries here resisting, like Yemen, etc. This is a regional, beginning of a regional war, which could lead to a nuclear war, in which there is no winner, losers, but in the nuclear, or all of us will be losers. Maybe the only winners will be cockroaches because they are resistant to nuclear radiation. So the point is, we are at an existential crossroad here. We have to choose. If we continue going down to the same road, it's catastrophic for all of humanity, not just for us Palestinians. For us Palestinians, it's been catastrophic. I mean, I wish we had more time to talk about this. We are 15 million Palestinians, some 8.5 or 9 million of us are refugees or displaced people. That's still the largest refugee population on earth, by the way. There's no other refugee population larger than the Palestinian refugees. So the question is, for us it's catastrophic, but now it's becoming catastrophic for the whole world. And so if we stay down this road of wars and greed and rampant capitalism and conflict, we're all in trouble. If we choose the other road, the road of sustainability, we call it, the road of coexistence, the road of diversity, and that's an important word to remember, diversity, because we are after biological diversity and also after human diversity. That's why the greedy people, the billionaires like Tusk, who is a racist, are against diversity. They want white only, or Christian only, or Jewish only, or this only, or that only. That destruction of human diversity and biological diversity are elements that are common in colonial systems. So our reaction to them in decolonizing, if you want, is to do the opposite, to encourage diversity, human diversity and biological diversity, to reconnect to our land. That is what we are doing, and that's what these institutions should be doing, and that's what, by the way, every single person on earth should be doing, because otherwise we are doomed as a species, not just, as I said, as Palestinians or something.
Yeah, so thank you for reminding us, of course, about the urgency of the situation regarding the environment. But nevertheless, if I may continue a little bit on the political game happening around these questions, do you feel a tension in terms of possible priorities? You are in such a critical situation in the area. the national question is still a sort of top priority for the Palestinian people. So do you feel a tension in the discussion with the authorities, with other potential partners for your activities, where people would say something like the environment is important, yes, but we have much more urgent priorities now, and we have to leave that aside for the moment. Do you feel that? We actually do feel that in Europe, even though our situation in a way is much less critical than yours. But now, sometimes even environmental activists are treated as terrorists here, right? So, do you feel something similar over there?
I mean, now there are more people dying in the Gaza Strip from the impact not of direct bombing, but from other impacts like denial of food, water, medicines, the environmental issues that are impacting their health. They're dying more of this than the direct bombing. I mentioned, for example, last 24 hours, 67 people were killed by direct bombing, including half of them children. But how many people died in Gaza in the past 24 hours total, and what was the causes of their death? Premature, older people. I mean, the average life expectancy in, let's say, I don't know, in Lebanon or in Israel or in a country like Greece is about in the 70s. The average life expectancy in the Gaza Strip is in the 40s. So you have an issue that's related to this environment, to this environmental health, to the physical health, to the psychological health. All of these things are impacted by this. And so hence, I don't think you either talk about the environment or talk about the genocide. No, you can talk about both, and they are related aspects. Ecocide is genocide. Climate change is genocide, is ecocide. Scholasticide, destruction of the environment, is also a genocide, a form of genocide, because you're destroying educated system. All the universities in Gaza were destroyed, all the museums, etc. Medicide, the destruction of hospitals, 38 hospitals and clinics in Gaza were destroyed. Medicide, destruction of the medical system, is a form of genocide. So you cannot separate these issues. They're all connected and they're all intertwined. And when we work towards sustainability, again, I go back to the positive aspect. When we work towards sustainability, we're working towards improvement of all of these things and reduction of the damage done from all of these things.
Yeah, okay, thank you. If I may change a little bit the topic, there is the issue of conservation of nature, and natural reserves in particular are a well-known tool to preserve at least some habitat for various species. There are many such places in the area, in the Palestine-Israeli area, and we see on websites that there are almost, or maybe around 400 nature reserves in the area. So it's approximately 16% of the land area. And I read that from a German website which is talking about the land area of Israel, and I'm not quite sure what it includes, whether it includes the occupied territories or not. Wikipedia, for instance, distinguishes between Israel and the occupied territories when it lists the parks and the natural reserves. But if you go to the website of the Israel Nature and Park Authority, there is no such distinction. The only distinction you find is there is one region called Judea and Samaria, right? Now the question I have for you is, in your work, you have shown that the natural reserves are often used for different purposes. They are used for annexation, they are used for military activities, but they are designated as nature reserves somehow. Could you tell us a bit more about that? And whether there is a kind of coordination of activism around that, a kind of pushback against the use of natural reserves in this way from activists, either from Israeli population or from Palestinian populations?
yes, Israel doesn't have borders. Israel is the only country on earth that doesn't recognize anything like borders of its state. It says it's flexible and it keeps expanding, so there's no point in it declaring a border. Israel doesn't say what its borders are. For now, Israel controls everything between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean. That's historic Palestine, plus they control parts of Syria and parts of Lebanon, and they're expanding in those areas. They're expanding in Syria, etc. To go back to the issue of this Israeli control of those areas and what it means relative to so-called nature reserves in Israel. I say so-called because we have to be careful. Israel is, uses the propaganda that they have a large percentage of the country, wherever its border is, that is designated as nature reserves. You can say yes, they have 16% of the land designated as nature reserves. But let's ask the question, who designates nature reserves within this area that the State of Israel is overruling or ruling or occupying or colonizing? Well, it's very interesting. Israel is a Zionist project. It's not a country. It's just a project. And this project was established long before the state was actually founded in 1948. So the project started some 60 years before 1948. And the first entities to colonize Palestine was a group called the Jewish National Fund, Keren Kayemet Israel, and that was established in 1905. In 1905, when they established this institution, its primary purpose was to colonize the land of Palestine. That's what it says. Now, this Jewish National Fund, Keren Kayemet Israel, is the one that designates so-called nature reserves. Okay, how many of those people who are employed by the Jewish National Fund, and there are thousands and thousands of people, how many of them know anything about nature or environmentalists or biologists? The answer is zero, okay? Zero people that know anything about nature. So how do they determine where to draw on a map and say that's a nature reserve while this area is not a nature reserve? It's a very good question. I researched that and I published papers on this. You can read them. But it turns out it has to do with the presence of Palestinians. If you want to exclude Palestinians from an area, it doesn't matter if it has good nature, bad nature, lots of endangered species or no endangered species, is irrelevant questions to them. It is the question of how to exclude Palestinians. That's how they use it, and that's how they determine this. That's why their nature reserves were established in the Galilee, in the Negev, where there are still a lot of Palestinians inside the Green Line. In the West Bank, that's why the nature reserves along the Jordan Valley. What do they use for these things? Like the nature reserves along the Jordan River basin, along the Jordan Valley. I told you already they damaged the Jordan River basin. So what do they use these nature reserves for along the Jordan River basin? They use them for military training sites. They use them for industrial settlements. They use them for residential settlements. They use them for agricultural settlements. Any use but protect nature. This is reality. And we actually, as Palestinians, reevaluated the so-called nature reserves that the Israelis designated in the West Bank, and we removed more than half of them, something like 60%, were not nature-related settlements or areas. The others we consolidate and we added some good areas based on the International Union of Conservation of Nature criteria. And the work was done with the IUCN. IUCN actually helped us designate those nature reserves. Of course, Israel doesn't respect our designations or the IUCN designations. They respect the designations of the Jewish National Fund. As I said, the supranational entity that was established before the State of Israel was even founded.
Okay, good, thank you. So I think we will now open the floor to the general audience here, and there will be a microphone that will circulate in the room. I think I saw a hand over there. Yes, there is a question over there already.
Thank you for your talk. Can you tell us about the effects, the future effects of climate change in the area?
Thank you. Very good question. This year, in Palestine, in general, on average, we got less than 42% rainfall than the average for the past 15 years. So it's incredible how much decrease in rainfall. Our annual temperature has already risen by 1.5 degrees in the last 15 years, and we expect it to rise by anywhere between 2 degrees to 4 degrees centigrades, depending on the computer model you use. So we are going to be devastated by climate change. Climate change is something I'm very interested in. There's something called climate justice. As you know, most climate change in the world is caused not by us, the indigenous people. It's caused by the developed countries like the US, Europe, Russia, etc. That's who causes the climate change. And of course, Israel, I mentioned, for example, just from jet fuel, how much climate change impact there is. So other people cause climate change, and we pay a heavier price for it than these other people. This is a huge problem for us. And we must all work together towards climate change climate justice, towards environmental justice, and so on. How do we do this? We need to do, as I said, research, education, conservation, community service. These are key elements of what we do towards sustainability, which in itself is an action against climate change.
Is there any other question? If not, maybe I can ask you one. You know, beside climate change, there is biodiversity, which is the other big concern, and pesticide use is one of the big threats to biodiversity. I looked up, so I don't know if you've studied pesticide use in the area, but I looked up on the website Our World in Data, and the country of Israel is considered to be one of the highest polluters next to Brazil, just after Brazil, in terms of quantity of pesticides per hectare. And I wonder, so you mentioned in your own work, you mentioned chemical plants that produce pesticides and that pollute the area, especially near Tulkarem, if I remember well. But what about the direct pollution of the pesticide use and also fertilizers? Polluting water and harming the farm workers. Do you have anything to share about that?
Yes, we have some studies. We need much more studies in this area. But pesticide use, for example, the areas that were studied in the West Bank, like Selfit area, Tubas areas, is very, very high. And actually there are pesticides, even though as you mentioned, Israel is a higher, they use industrialized agriculture. which requires the use of a lot of pesticides, a lot of chemical fertilizers. So Israel is a big, big polluter in terms of the pesticides and insecticides. But even Israel itself limits some pesticides for use near human populations. And what do they do with these ones that they limit for use near to human population? They sell them to Palestinian farmers near Palestinian populations. Because they don't care about our health. Of course, we don't count as indigenous people. We are dispensable, if you want. So, and in fact, you see cancer rates going up in some places. I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but one of my master students did her work on one of the Israeli plants, Israeli industrial facilities that's built inside the West Bank. Again, this is also contrary to international law. Of course, Israeli residential settlements are illegal according to international law, but also Israeli industrial settlements are illegal according to international law. In occupied territory, per the Fourth Geneva Convention, you're not supposed to build such facilities. But anyway, they built over 15, they call industrial complexes in the West Bank. One industrial complex that we studied near Salfit that dumps toxic chemicals on the local Palestinians includes pesticides and insecticide factories. So they chose not to build these factories next to their Israeli population centers. They built them next to the Palestinian population centers, dumping their toxic waste on us. And we studied this, and we looked at DNA damage and chromosome breaks, the health of the local population, and we find significant impact of this. So yes, there's a lot of this kind of thing. This is also falls under the umbrella of the words environmental justice. We need to work for environmental.
Okay, we lost just the last part of the sentence, but because of sound breaking.
Oh, I said when they do that, when they put industrial settlements in Palestinian areas causing damage to our health, this falls under the issue of environmental justice, and it is against international environmental laws and international humanitarian laws.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, is there any other question in the room? Yes, there is one question here, please.
Bonjour, je ne sais pas encore si c'est un peu tôt, mais est-ce qu'on sait déjà les conséquences que vont avoir tous les bombardements sur le sol de Gaza? Pourra-t-il être à nouveau fertile? Est-ce que quelque chose pourra pousser à nouveau, vu toutes les bombes qui tombent, et en plus le phosphore blanc, en fait, est-ce qu'ils utilisent, qu'on ne sait pas trop. Donc, est-ce qu'on a déjà des renseignements et on sait si cette terre va être à nouveau fertile un jour?
Okay.
Merci.
So the question, I will translate, if you don't mind. The question is about the consequences for the Gaza land itself, the soil, and the quality of the soil of the war going on. Is there any hope that it can become fertile again? And if so, when can it happen and how? Supposing, for instance, that the war stopped now, how long would it take before it can become fertile again?
Yeah, very, very important question. Thank you for this. Because after all, this is what we want to work on, and we are working on it. I already have friends in Gaza that are taking soil samples. We need to figure a way to get them out of Gaza so that we can test them for residues of the war. We are already working with some of our remaining colleagues in Gaza. Many of our colleagues, including scientists at the universities, were killed. But those who are remaining, we're still in touch with them. And we hope, I just actually wrote a proposal for developing an institute similar to our institute, Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, to do an institute like that in Gaza that's concerned with soil reclamation and restitution. As far as how long would it take and whether it's possible even, all of these questions cannot be answered at this stage without proper research on the ground. And this is what we are lacking. We really need to have access to the ground. We really need to rebuild institutions in Gaza. And we need to study this. For example, if I take the water aquifer, you asked me, the water aquifer is totally useless now in Gaza. I mean, it can be used for washing cars and washing dishes, but certainly not for drinking or eating or cooking with it. So it's really bad quality water now in the aquifer due to various Israeli activities. I don't have time to go through them, but let's say you want to ask the question, is the water aquifer possible to replenish, reclaim? I can honestly say I don't know. My guess is if it is possible to redo the water aquifer, to replenish it, if, and there are many ifs, if Israel allows the water from the mountains to go back flowing into Gaza, if Israel allows additional water to be created in Gaza to feed local consumption while the aquifer is refilled and reused. There are many ifs, but if all of these things happen and there's open borders so that people can import what they need to purify water, etc. If all of these things happen, then you can say the water aquifer may be recoverable in 20 years. But this is my guess, this is not science, okay? It has to be researched. If I take the agricultural fields that we shows the tree damage, you know, an olive tree takes a long time for it to be productive. When we destroyed the olive trees, okay, you can replant olive trees. Hopefully, if the soil is still fertile and the heavy metals and the depleted uranium have not impacted the quality of the soil enough to prevent growth of a new tree. But if you start planting new trees, you need another 10 years, 20 years for the tree to start producing, you know, even 20% of what the previous tree was producing. So you can see there's a lot of variables, a lot of things that have not been researched enough that we need to research, and I am very interested in researching. Some of it we can do remotely with our colleagues in Gaza, even though they don't have any facilities. They can at least take photographs and do some tests growing some seeds. Let's say grow some beans and see if the beans will absorb the heavy metals in the soil and then get rid of those beans and plant another crop of beans. We can do some preliminary experiments even without direct access, and we will do that. We are doing that. But it's very, 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 very difficult at this point to even speculate on reconstitution and restitution times.
Okay, thank you. I think this answered the question quite thoroughly. Another question from here. Yes, thank you.
Je vais parler en français. Bonjour Mazin, c'est Sarah. On s'est vu à de multiples reprises, y compris à la grande mosquée de Massy pour les journées du GAIC. Je voudrais juste apporter un point. Il y a deux choses qui sont différentes. Il y a qu'est-ce que pourrait donner un Gaza vivant, et puis il y a ce que font les Gazaouis maintenant. Et il faut comprendre qu'ils n'ont pas attendu pour replanter. Les gens dans le nord, jusqu'à la dernière attaque incroyable en octobre, ils avaient replanté, ils sortaient des légumes. Évidemment, maintenant, il n'y a plus un mètre carré utilisable, et puis les gens sont dans une situation effroyable. En novembre de 2024, les paysans avec lesquels on travaille, ceux de Kouza et d'Abassan, donc du sud-est de Khan Younis, étaient en camp de réfugiés à l'ouest de Deir el-Balar. Et les paysans de Deir el-Balar sont venus les voir et voir les copains de l'équipe UGFP pour leur dire nous, on est prêts à replanter. On est prêt à replanter, on en a marre et on va replanter si vous nous aidez financièrement à avoir de quoi tirer l'eau des forages. Ça a été fait et en 2 mois ils ont commencé à sortir des légumes. Alors bien sûr, hein, ça ne veut pas dire qu'il n'y a pas de pollution, ça ne veut pas dire qu'ils ne s'empoisonnent pas eux-mêmes, etc. Mais au moins l'urgence elle-même, elle est possible. Et en février, quand ils ont pu retourner sur les terres de Kouza Abassan, ils ont immédiatement recommencé à replanter. Ce qui veut dire qu'il y a 2 choses qui sont différentes. Il y a les grandes analyses, il y a voir qu'est-ce que pourrait devenir un Gaza vivant, mais il y a l'urgence, et l'urgence, ils la font eux-mêmes, quoi. Actuellement, ils poussent des légumes à Gaza.
So, Mazin, I don't know if you could understand some of that. Maybe I can try to summarize.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So that was from Sarah, whom you couldn't see on the camera, I'm afraid, because the camera is just on the right. But yeah, if it can be termed, so she knows you, and she has met you in some place, I don't remember where, but in Massy, in France, or? Okay, okay, so that was in France. And so she was making the point that there is the question of long-term rebuilding Gaza and replenishing nature and human life there. But also in the short term, they have witnessed in their links with the population there that there are already efforts to replant and regrow stuff, and things were happening last fall where some crops were already obtained with kind of emergency agriculture type of activities. So that was the point she wanted to make. I'm not sure there was a question more than a point, but so if you want to comment on this comment.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I agree with you. People, I mean, this is what's hopeful and makes us optimistic. People are very resilient. I mean, I have friends who are planting next to their tents, you know, and when they move their plants with them. You know, when they are moved from one tent city to another tent city. There was one girl in Gaza who invented a way to take seawater and desalinate it using simple, just solar power and simple tubes and black paint. You know, there's so many innovative and interesting examples of Palestinian resilience in the Gaza Strip. I mean, I don't want to underestimate the horrors that they are subjected to. It's really, truly horrific. But there is also that element of human, I don't know how to describe it. We call it in Arabic sumud. Sumud is a word that combines resilience, resistance, persistence, all of these things in one word called sumud. So that's what we have, and I'm very proud of our people and what they have been able to withstand.
Thank you. Any other question from the audience?
Probably enough for
maybe, I don't know at what time we should stop. Okay, we still have a bit of time. Maybe I can ask one last question if you want, because Mazin, you've been involved not just in research activities and also things around sustainability, but also in inter-community dialogue. And so I wanted to ask you how much degree of cooperation and mutual support you find with Israeli activists working for the environment and also Israeli institutions. Is there any cooperation? I read in your work that there is a Palestinian national biodiversity strategy and action plan, right? And I wonder if that happens in an occupied territory, what kind of coordination, what kind of political game is happening behind these things. And so what is the interplay between the authorities, of the competing authorities between the Israeli state and the Palestinians, and the civil society organizations? What kind of coordination or competition is there between all these players?
Yeah. As I said, Israel is not concerned about the environment. The Israeli state and Israeli institutions as a whole, they are colonizing apartheid regime that's interested in colonizing not just Palestine, but expanding beyond Palestine. That's the aim, and in many ways, Israel has characteristics like South Africa under apartheid. Having said that, it's important for us to distinguish between activities of joint struggle and activities of normalization. Activities of joint struggle, I was arrested, for example, many times for nonviolent resistance, and half the times I was arrested, there were Israeli Jews who were joining me in protesting the apartheid racist genocidal regime that is ruling over us. So that's joint struggle, and we welcome joint struggle. The normalization we reject. So I don't, for example, collaborate with Israeli institutions. I'm at Bethlehem University. Bethlehem University and Palestinian universities do not collaborate with Israeli universities because Israeli universities are part of a system which should be boycotted. That's why there's an academic and cultural and economic boycott of the State of Israel and its institutions, just like we did with South Africa under apartheid. So we don't boycott individuals. We, in fact, encourage joint struggle with Israelis. I had one Israeli woman who volunteered with us for 2 years almost. She lived with us, which also shows the lie that we can't live together. But they have to be anti-Zionist, anti-colonialist, and willing to struggle with us for freedom, not be Zionist, racist collaborators who want to destroy us. I cannot, of course, collaborate with such people.
Yeah, okay. If there is no question left, yeah, maybe one last question from the room.
J'en avais une
Yeah?
petite aussi, pardon.
Okay, maybe two.
Okay.
My question is about French research institutions and universities.
Can you hear the question? I'm not sure the microphone is okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you give us an idea about, are you obtaining some help from French research centers or institutions? And may I extend my question to the European level?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question. You at CMRS, I would love to collaborate more with people there. I collaborated briefly with a couple of French. In fact, there's a person from France who is now an intern volunteer with us. She and I are working on research together, but it's very limited, and there's so much more that we can do together on so many areas of research, not just biodiversity. For example, we can collaborate in museology and botanic gardens, in plant issues, on agriculture, on sustainability, on education, and there are so many research areas. In fact, any research area that any of you are involved in, theoretically, we could collaborate on it and do papers together. If you can email me again, info@palestinenature.org, I would love to explore these kinds of collaborations for us to write grants, proposals together, to get your support, and to work together, fund our own research and your research. There's European mechanisms from the EU, like NextMed. There's a call now we are submitting, actually involving Italians and Greece and Jordan and Palestine and one other country, I think Tunisia, that we are submitting under the next proposals from the EU call. So there's always possibilities for collaborative funded research, and I would love to collaborate with any of you who want to help us in this regard. It's by luck that, when they did the Sykes-Picot agreement, that Syria and Lebanon were mandated by the French, and Palestine and Jordan mandated by the British. So we ended up speaking English, in Syria and Lebanon speaking French. I should learn more French. I know very few things, but it would be nice to develop those kinds of things much more. And since I am now in Lebanon, there are people in Lebanon also willing to collaborate with you, and they speak French fluently, of course, so it would be great to collaborate.
Okay, I think the word is well received, and it's easy to find your coordinates, but if people are looking for them, the organizers of the seminar can surely provide them. There was one last question from Nicolas? No? Sure? Okay, so we can... Okay, right. So we'll conclude with some words of information. And let me thank you, Mazin, very much for bringing your expertise and experience with us tonight.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you.
Je vais parler en français. Merci beaucoup à toutes les personnes du public qui se sont déplacées pour cette séance de rentrée. On est très heureux de vous revoir. Merci bien sûr au professeur Qumsiyeh et à Marc Fleurbaey de leur présence ce soir et de cette modération sur un thème qui nous tenait particulièrement à cœur. Par ailleurs, la séance du 12 mai reprendra ces thématiques. Elle nous permettra donc de les approfondir. Donc rendez-vous dans 2 semaines, lundi 12 mai, pour une rencontre sur l'agriculture palestinienne en contexte colonial, avec Taher Al-Labadi, qui est chercheur à l'Institut français du Moyen-Orient à Jérusalem, Fadia Panozetti, qui est doctorante au Centre de coopération de développement international, et la modération sera assurée par Noura Boukteir de l'Université Paris 1. Merci beaucoup et à dans 2 semaines. Au revoir.
you.